You are live.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome to February 3rd's meeting of the Sierra Madre Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call.
Yes. Chair Pevsner.
Here.
Vice Chair Dennison.
Here.
Commissioners Dallas.
Here.
Hutt.
Here.
And Spears.
Present.
Great. We will then move on to the approval of the agenda.
I'll move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a question on the agenda before we vote. I just want to understand on the discussion items 1 and 2, are we voting on those? Or are we just discussing them and then we're going to have a public hearing?
We are.
I didn't really understand what we're up to.
Yes, we're just having a discussion item for both of those items. And then we will be asking the Planning Commission to direct staff to schedule those for public hearing on February 17th.
Okay, that sounds great. Thanks.
So who seconded the...
Is that a second? Okay.
Dennison.
Very good. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Wonderful. Okay, next.
Do a roll call vote. I thought I remembered.
Oh yeah. Do we need a live roll call vote? I'm sorry.
Yes, because of virtual meetings, we need roll call.
Okay. All right. So roll call vote. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
For approval of the agenda, Chair Pevsner,
Yes.
Vice Chair Dennison,
Yes.
Commissioner Dallas,
Yes.
Commissioner Hutt,
Yes.
and Commissioner Spears.
Yes.
Passes unanimously by voice vote.
Thank you. All right. Move on to the approval of the minutes of January 20th. Any comments, changes?
I didn't have any comments, and hearing none from anyone else, I will move for approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 20th.
Okay. Do I have a second? Yep. Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Chair Pevsner,
Aye or yes?
Vice Chair Dennison,
Abstain.
Commissioner Dallas,
Yes.
Commissioner Hutt,
Yes.
Commissioner Spears.
Yes.
Motion
Great.
passes with 1 abstention.
Thank you. Council liaison. Kelly, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. Anything to report or to
No
bring to
real
our attention?
report. Yeah, no real report. I just wanted to put out into the public realm that we are having our joint City Council Planning Commission meeting on February 15th at 5 p.m. at the Bandshell in Memorial Park, where we will have a discussion around the proposed project at the Meadows. And so I just want to make sure that that's out there. I know the city's going to start publicizing it through all of the various channels, I think starting tomorrow, but thought we could get that out a little bit ahead of that. So
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to community input. And this is the section when anybody in the audience or anyone who wants to call in, paying attention, can call in and speak on anything that's not on tonight's agenda. You have 5 minutes. We will give you 3 minutes to come to call in. How's that sound?
You do have someone already in queue and ready to speak.
Oh, terrific. Okay. Hello, who? Can you state your name for us? And
I'm patching them through now.
okay, thank you.
All right, caller, you are live.
Deb Sheridan, Valley Vista. Hi, good evening, Commissioner. I'm glad you're trying to keep us all safe, but anyway, tonight I am speaking to you as a concerned resident and also as a member of Preserve Sierra Madre. When the city manager, ministerial representatives, New Urban West representatives announced the potential sale of 20 acres to the developer to build 42 large homes, I thought was, okay, let's help make this the best development possible. this is so much better than 100 or so homes proposed in 2004. Since then, I have come to realize that this is an ill-designed project, dangerous area, as you have heard from concerned residents for the past 2 years. My concerns tonight are, 1, we were told there will be a joint meeting of Planning Commission and City Council conducted by New Urban West. And as of 5 minutes ago, we residents did not know when that would be. So I would implore you to get the word out that they are actually having a meeting. When I had asked former Mayor Arizmendi when it was going to be, she said, I don't know. And when I asked Mayor Goss, he said, there's no need to add any more meetings than what we've already projected. But he never told me when it was going to be. Number 2, will this meeting be before the Planning Commission where we get a whole 5 minutes to comment, or will it be before the City Council where we are limited to 3 minutes? 3, we have begged for a town hall meeting, and this isn't it. The developer running the show, and it's my understanding that we won't be allowed to even ask questions of the developer. I hope you have had a chance to read the 112 thoughtful letters sent to Director Gonzalez about the draft environmental impact report. My concern is that we at Preserve Sierra Madre spent over 2 months studying the DEIR, talking to experts, reviewing our general plan, and we sent in an acknowledged 24-page response. That letter is totally missing from the EIR. Now we have finally heard from Director Gonzalez that it was, quote, unquote, an oversight, that it wasn't included in the final EIR. An oversight, really? Director Gonzalez, 24 pages was an oversight? Remember the 24 missing minutes of the Nixon tapes? I might add the 2 letters were included that were received a day late, and as was my email asking City Clerk Aguilar if we could send emails or if our comments had to be in writing, and those were included. No wonder residents don't trust City Hall anymore. I am respectfully requesting that you, Director Gonzalez, distribute our report to each member of the Planning Commission and the City Council. I will drop 10 copies off at City Hall tomorrow so that they don't get, quote unquote, lost. And we have 5 printed up for the Planning Commission members and 5 printed up City Council members, and I thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you, Barb. Well, we got an email, I guess, to that effect as well, Jen, that you'll post. Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Nobody else wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, we'll do our usual countdown and wait if someone else wants to call in.
And while we're waiting, I wanted to inform the Planning Commission that what Deb Sheridan was indicating is correct. I received a call or an email from Lynn Coleman. We both were looking for the document as well. I had it in the original transmittal. I called the environmental consultant. They searched for it, did not find it, and actually we discovered that there were a total of 6 emails that were not captured in the final EIR. And what we will be doing is incorporating those in the final EIR, informing those individuals that it is now posted to the EIR, and it will be via an updated link. And we'll post that to our webpage as well.
Thanks, Vince. 2 minutes. One. And 1 minute. Sorry. Thank you. We're down to the discussion items. So we'll bring forward the first discussion item, the consideration of municipal code text amendments in response to state law. I trust there's a presentation.
We have a presentation by our city attorney, Alex Giragosian, today.
Great. You're on, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Let me see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So as you may have heard in the news, SB 9 and Assembly 803 passed in the last legislative session. It's currently state law. What we didn't want to do as a city is adopt an urgency ordinance, meaning it would go directly to council and council would adopt something temporarily. We wanted to kind of think this one through and bring a draft ordinance before the Planning Commission that would then provide a recommendation to the City Council. So that's why we're adopting this in February, as opposed to some cities that adopted urgency ordinances back in January or end of December. So we're going to cover 2 bills, but really 3 distinct concepts. SB 9 has 2 parts to it. The first is the urban lot split. So we cite, there's a new government code section that's been added to the Subdivision Map Act. And in short, and I'll get into the details later, but in short, what it does is it ministerially approves splitting a single parcel into 2 in a single family residential zone. So just try to keep that concept, that first concept in mind, urban lot split. Now there's a second part of SB 9, what we're calling the ministerial design review. That term doesn't exist in the code, in the government code. We're giving it that name to make it easier to remember. And that adds a new section to the planning and zoning law. So this section ministerially approves development of up to 2 new units in a single family residential zone. And then the last bill that we're going to cover, the second bill, AB803, relates to small home lot developments. This also adds a section to the Subdivision Map Act. And some people refer to this as like the SB 9 for multifamily or the bungalow court law to help give some perspective. What this does is it ministerially approves splitting a single parcel and the development of single family units up to a maximum allowable density in a multifamily residential zone. So we're gonna go over all these in greater detail, but I just wanted to provide an overview of these three general concepts as we go into them. So the purpose of this law, before we get into the details, is according to the legislator, we have what's called the missing middle problem. We have a lot of single family homes, and in places like downtown LA, we have a lot of high rises. But what we don't have is our types of development in the middle. So duplexes, triplexes, ADUs are caught up in that. Basically, the concept here is building homes that are affordable by design is the term that's being used. Meaning you don't have to purchase a new lot. You can build a small home and it's going to be cheaper because it doesn't have all the construction costs and you don't have to go through the traditional lot purchase process. Now, let's talk about eligibility for SB9. For both urban lot splits and ministerial design review, they both apply to single-family residential zones. This term, single-family residential zone, isn't defined under SB9. And how we've been interpreting it at the city is a residential zone designed for single-family development. So, for example, not, let's say, if a commercial zone allowed for single-family development, we would exclude that. Even though single-family development, even though you can have a single-family home there, we're excluding that. We're excluding the manufacturing zone. We're excluding the commercial zone because what we think the state's contemplating here are residential zones where single-family use is contemplated. And in the city of Sierra Madre, that's the R1, the residential canyon, and the hillside management zone. If individuals are looking at the zoning map online, they might see there's a residential professional that's now an overlay. It's no longer a zone. AB803, on the other hand, only applies to multifamily residential zones. So that's the R2, R3, the R320 and R330, which the Planning Commission has had the opportunity to review but hasn't yet adopted. It doesn't apply to the commercial, institutional, single family, manufacturing, doesn't apply to all those other zones. Now back to SB9. We're gonna go through the development standards for both urban lot splits, for ministerial design review, and then we're gonna go through it for the small home lot developments too. So starting with urban lot splits, the government code says that an urban lot split shall permit a home that's no less than 800 square feet per unit, with a floor area of no less than 800 square feet per unit. It shall permit a density of at least 2 units per parcel. The minimum lot size is going to be 1,200 square feet once they're split. So that means the original lot must be at least 2,400 square feet. And these are, keep in mind, these are minimum sizes. It doesn't need to be this small. And a new parcel may not be smaller than 40% of the lot area of the original parcel. So if you have a single parcel and you split it into 2, one can be 60% of the original parcel and the other can be 40%. But it couldn't be the case that one's 65% and one's 35%. That wouldn't be permitted.
And just to clarify,
yes.
Council, these are split in 2, right? So you can't split in 3 or 4. It's just one parcel you cut in half.
Correct. One part, I'll cover this more later on, but it's one parcel you cut in half and you can't split it again using SB9. This is a one-time thing that can be used on a single parcel.
Okay.
Commissioner Spears?
If you have a unit that is 800 square feet and has to be at least 2 on the per parcel, how can you have a 1,200 square foot lot.
On an individual lot, the unit needs to be at least, you need to provide for, the development standards need to provide for a unit on a single parcel that's at least 800 square feet. So if there are two, then you can have 800 here, 800 there.
That's 1,600 square feet.
Correct, if you split the lot. This is on an individual split lot.
And the resulting lots must be at least 1,200 square feet. So you can't have a density of 2 if you only have 1,200.
You can't have a density of 2 if you only have 1,200, correct. But the individual, this isn't about, this is a single home.
Okay. So
We're not,
if it's 1,200 square feet, there can only be one unit. So density is just 1.
correct, unless you build up.
Oh dear. Okay.
You can, if you have a 1,200 square foot parcel, you could have 2 400 square foot floor plates that are 2 stories tall.
Right.
Are you, so on the density bullet, are you saying that the undivided parcel must, after division, have 2 units? Or are you saying that once divided, both parcels have to have 2 units?
Once divided, both parcels can have 2 units, a maximum.
Can or must?
Can, not must. It's up to the property owner.
So that second bullet there, at least 2 units per parcel, that's,
No more
I
than.
think it's, you read that, allows at least 2.
Yeah,
Allows at least.
the city must allow at least 2 units per parcel is how it should be
Okay.
stated.
All right, that's fine.
Height. SB9 is silent as to height. But again, we can't impose development standards that would prevent up to 2 units on a single parcel or 800 square foot unit.
So do
Setback.
we need to modify our existing height requirements then?
For SB9 specific ones, perhaps. Let me get to the rest, and then we'll look at the individual ordinance.
Okay.
And we can start addressing some of these development standards.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. Setbacks. So there's no setbacks for existing structures in the same location with same dimensions, very similar to the ADU law. And setbacks of up to 4 feet from the side and rear lot lines, exactly like the ADU law. In fact, this SB9 statute is placed right between the ADU law and JADU law, to give you a sense that this is supposed to operate like an ADU law. Parking standards, the city can require off-street parking of up to 1 space per unit unless it's located within half a mile of a high-quality transit corridor, which we don't have in the city, or within 1 block of a car share location, which I also don't think we have in the city. Now, switching from urban lot splits to ministerial design review, still part of SB9, just a different concept. The floor area has the same requirement, no less than 800 square feet. Density, the city can, an applicant can apply for up to 2 units on a single parcel to be processed ministerially. Lot size, ministerial design review provisions of SB9 are silent as to lot size. Height, again, silent as to height. Setbacks, same as the urban lot split. And parking, same as the urban lot split. Now let's compare that to AB803, the one that applies to multifamily zones. For the small home lot development, floor area, an average total area of floor space not to exceed 1,700 net habitable square feet is a term taken from the government code. So it excludes garages, other accessory structures that aren't habitable. Density.
Sorry,
Sure.
Mr. City Attorney, average total area, does that mean across all of the units, the average?
Correct. Correct. That's right. Density. The development will result in at least as many units as the maximum allowable residential density. So if you're in an R3 and an R3 contemplates 3 units, and to take advantage of this in the R3, you have to have at least 3 units constructed. Residential properties within a radius of 500 feet of the site are zoned for less than 30 dwellings per units per acre. So I guess with this, what the law doesn't want is for you to build some kind of bungalow court next to high rises. It's trying to keep some proportion. So if within a 500-foot radius, you know, your properties are zoned for something greater than 30 dwelling units per acre, you're gonna have giant apartments. And this is really about, you should think about it in terms of like a bungalow court, because it's the only way the small home lot development will make sense. Lot size, minimum lot size requirements are prohibited, but there is a maximum statutory lot size, 5 acres. So if you're greater than 5 acres, if the parcel is greater than 5 acres, it can't take advantage of this provision, which we don't have in Sierra. Height. Existing height limits apply. Setbacks. External existing front, side, and rear setback requirements can be adopted, but no setback requirements between units except as required in the California Building Code. Parking. No standard for the number of parking spots, so our underlying code can apply. No standard for whether parking must be on-site or off-site. But the government code does prohibit parking where, or does allow us to, or prohibits us from requiring parking to be enclosed or covered. Now going back to SB9 for a moment. This concept of ministerial approval and what that means. So for an urban lot split, under SB9, it'll be permitted by right and processed ministerially. No public hearings. Currently, if you're going to split a single lot into 2, you need a parcel map. And a parcel map requires you to go to the Planning Commission and then the City Council. Currently, under our current law. Some limitations, the lot to be split cannot be created through an urban lot split. So you can only use this once. And it can't be adjacent to another parcel that was subject to an urban lot split. So what they don't want are developers coming in, buying up parcels all next to each other and splitting them up. In addition, the applicant, and it's not on the slide here, but in addition, the applicant must sign an affidavit stating that he will occupy one of the lots for at least 3 years, not use the property as a short-term rental, and that it's going to remain a residential use. The reason for this requirement is to limit house flipping and to prevent corporate developers that have come into the single-family residential market from buying up homes. Some of those include like Home Partners of America, Blackstone Group. It prevents these investment companies from coming in, purchasing single-family private homes and renting them out, which they've done in a number of cities. Now, what does ministerial approval mean for this ministerial design review permit concept? So under ministerial design review, single family homes and duplexes will be permitted by right and processed ministerially. No public hearings. Under our current code, in the R1 zone, duplexes would be permitted conditionally. And if it's in the hillside management zone, you would need to get a hillside development permit to build a home.
Alex, does this apply to all single family or just once created by an urban lot split?
This applies to all single families, all new developments. So it wouldn't apply to improvements of your home or replacements, additions. This applies to new development on an empty lot.
So how long, if you had a lot with a house on it and you demolished it, how long would you have to wait until you could do this as opposed to go under the existing rules?
Yeah, the government code doesn't have a set standard for that, but if the city viewed that as a replacement, then I don't see that they could apply the ministerial design review permit.
Okay, thank you.
So something to keep in mind, this SB9 process creates a maximum of 4 dwelling units on the original parcel. So just to think it through, there's the urban lots, you have a single parcel, you have an urban lot split, so you split them up. And then on each parcel, you can build up to 2 units. So now you have 4 units total. Under our existing ordinance, right, because of the ADU law, you can have on a single parcel, you can have a home, plus a JADU, plus an ADU. So you can get up to 3 units currently under existing state law, or under prior state law, and under existing state law under SB9, now you can have up to 4. And lastly, looking at what the ministerial approval looks like for small home lot developments. Subdivisions and multifamily developments will be permitted by right and processed ministerially. The difference here in this one, interestingly, is that unlike SB9, that says expressly no public hearings, AB803 doesn't say that. And so I'll talk about it a little bit later, how we're trying to include this preliminary design review concept that we discussed in prior meetings in this small home lot development ordinance. Limitations on the use of AB803 include that the individual homes have to be for sale, lots have to be held in fee simple, and they need to be single family residential homes. Exceptions. Now going back to SB9 again, some exceptions. There are a list of exceptions drawn from SB 35, which is a different ordinance that was adopted, I think, in 2017 to facilitate the construction of low-income housing. SB 35 has a long list of places where SB 35 doesn't apply. And SB 9 has taken that list and incorporated it into this law. One such place are very high fire hazard severity zones. But law says if we've adopted mitigation measures, then you can build in those very high fire hazard severity zones. And almost every city that I can think of has adopted mitigation measures. If you'd like, Director Gonzalez can get into in greater detail what those mitigation measures are, but I believe it's all tied to the building code, has to do with building material for the property, setbacks, things like that. I want to quickly address a public comment we received. So one of the public comments talked about habitat for protected species. That habitat, that protection comes from this list as well, this SB 35 list. It's a pretty novel concept. I'll note that the city of, I believe it was Woodside up north, just zoned its entire city a protected habitat for the mountain lion.
For mountain lions, yeah.
Yeah, so I looked up, I read the staff memo prepared on that to see what their reasoning was. And it was pretty interesting. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen for a second. I'll come back to it. But what they basically said is that the mountain lion has been designated a potentially endangered species, something like that. There's a special term for it. And so therefore it's afforded protection in its habitat. And the real question here is who gets to choose where the habitat is. The habitat is generally designated by the federal government and there's a special procedure under the Endangered Species Act, and the state government has the California Endangered Species Act, and they have a special procedure too. I'm not aware of any state law that authorizes a city to designate habitat for a state or federal endangered species. The map that they relied on in Woodside, I just want to show you because I think it's interesting. Here is the map that they relied on. And if you can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
So Woodside is here, and they said because Woodside is part of CCN, which is a certain type of mountain lion, that the entire city of Woodside is going to be covered, is a protected habitat. The city of Sierra Madre is somewhere here, and we're part of SGSB, right? The San Gabriel San Bernardino Mountains. And so we could make the same argument that the entire city of Sierra Madre is protected habitat. But as you can see, the entire state is listed as pretty much habitat, with the exception maybe downtown LA. The entire state is habitat for the mountain lion. So realistically speaking, I don't think that that determination by the city of Woodside is going to hold up. I'll note it is very novel, and I'm curious to see what a court decides, because that's definitely going to get litigated. Going back to the presentation, the one loophole, it seems, is this exception for historic properties and districts. So Sierra Madre has a few historic properties, but it doesn't have any historic districts. And we don't have an ordinance in place for historic districts currently. But it seems that's the only exception. And I don't know how long that exception will last, but it's there. SB 9 curtails the city's power to limit lot splits and duplexes, but says nothing about the authority of HOAs to amend their CCNRs to enforce any such limitation. This same difference existed in the ADU law. If you all remember, the ADU law limited cities, but it did not limit HOAs. And then 2 years later, they changed the law, and now HOAs are limited the same way cities are with respect to ADUs. I suspect the same limitation will be adopted for SB 9. Go on to the next slide. Exceptions for AB 803. So it's prohibited on sites identified in the housing element as a site to accommodate any portion of the city's arena for low-income households. And this provision basically ensures that developments do not compete with the city's obligation to identify sufficient sites for affordable housing. Unlike SB 9, AB 803 is silent as to an exception for historic properties or districts and sensitive sites, that SB 35 list I talked about earlier. It also prohibits the city from imposing the formation of a homeowners association. And the purpose there being, I read through the legislative history. One of the stated reasons was because the HOA fees sometimes can be a quarter, a third, or even half the cost of the home, the monthly mortgage payment. They wanted to make sure that the small home lot development remained affordable. And so they're preventing cities from imposing HOA requirements. Now, anti-displacement. This concept we've seen come up in the past 3-4 years again and again. It was in SB 330, it was in the Housing Accountability Act, and it's also in SB 9. With this concept, the legislator wants to create housing, but it doesn't want to create housing at the risk of pushing people out of their existing homes. It wants to keep the existing homes and create new homes. That's the concept. And so under SB 9, urban lot splits would not, an urban lot split can only be used if it would not require demolition or alteration of a housing unit subject to a recorded covenant, ordinance, or law that restricts rent to affordable housing levels, subject to rent or price controls, occupied by a tenant in the last 3 years, or removed from the rental market under the Ellis Act within the last 15 years. And that's, the Ellis Act allows people to take housing off of the market for rent in order to either live in it themselves or have family members live in it, things like that. The same anti-displacement provisions exist for the ministerial design review provisions, with one difference that I've highlighted in red. That difference reads, the ministerial design review does not demolish more than 25% of the existing exterior structural walls, unless allowed by the city. The legislative history doesn't really tell us why this exists. Planning staff talked about it. We think it's because the legislator doesn't want the home to be torn down. It wants the home to remain. And to the extent you want to add a duplex, you want to add another home to it and attach it, you can only take off one wall. So you can attach the duplex to the back or the side of the home. Otherwise, all the same limitations apply. AB 803, small home lot developments, again, have the same limitations. The only difference being that, for whatever reason, the tenancy duration is longer. Instead of 3 years, it's 7 years. Now, findings. Every good permit should have a finding. The findings in this case would be that the development complies with Chapter 16.18 or Chapter 17.59. So proposed Chapter 16.18 is for urban lot splits. Proposed Chapter 17.59 is for ministerial design review permits. Second, the development is consistent with all other objective local general plan, zoning, subdivision, and design standards. And third, the building official has not concluded that the development has a specific adverse impact on public health or safety that cannot be mitigated or avoided without rendering the development financially infeasible. That same requirement exists for small home lot displacements as well. The building official has not concluded that the development has a specific adverse impact on public health or safety that cannot be mitigated or avoided without rendering the development financially infeasible. I want to give you an example of what that looks like. Recently, we had an ADU application submitted to the city. And as part of that ADU application, they wanted to build an ADU in the back, but the ADU didn't connect to the sewer. And so they wanted to connect to their, so in order to build it, we told them you need to connect to your septic. And before they could connect to their septic, we're making them conduct a study. Public Works is making them conduct a study to make sure that their septic tank can take on the additional load. If it can't, the ADU is denied. Something similar would probably happen here. It's just a similar concept. If there are any public health or safety concerns that can't be ameliorated, the project will be denied. So I tried to give an overview of what things look like now with SB 9 and AB 803 in the mix. So generally when an application comes in, you have a pre-filing conference or a pre-development review, depending on whether it's a lot split or an approval of a development. And then it's going to go to planning and zoning review in the planning department. And then we're going to have to determine, is this subject to discretionary review or is this subject to ministerial review? Now, discretionary review, the permits that are relevant here are the design review permit, the administrative design review permit, the parcel or tentative tract map, and I should have added also the hillside development permit and administrative hillside development permit. Those are discretionary permits. Currently, for planning review and administrative design, for design review and administrative design review, the planning director makes a determination, and for parcel or tentative tract maps, the planning commission makes a recommendation to the city council, and city council makes the ultimate decision. But because we have SB9 and AB803, we have some ministerial processes we need to adopt. Ministerial design review, urban lot splits, small home lot developments, these would all be ministerially approved now. So what types of ministerial approvals are there? Well, we have a number now because of changes in state law. And the distinction we're making here doesn't really exist in state law. We're making this distinction to provide the Planning Commission with as much, not discretion per se, but review as we can give them. State law is clear that urban lot splits, ministerial design review permits, JADUs and ADUs cannot have hearings. It says so expressly that there can't be any public hearing for those projects. But there is no such prohibition on density bonus permits, small home lot developments, the religious housing overlay permit we were contemplating in the last meeting, or the high density residential zones like the R330, R320 that we contemplated in the last meeting. So staff wants to use that preliminary design review concept in some of these ministerial reviews where a public hearing is permitted. Basically, this application would come before the city staff. Staff would review it, make sure it complies with all the standards. And then once we have a complete application, that complete application would then go to the Planning Commission for review and comment. Not for approval, but for review and comment, to help the applicant identify any issues with the project. And then after the review and comment, it would come back to planning staff, and then planning staff, the director would have to determine whether or not it's going to be approved. So limitations on design review. No more design review for the construction of new single-family units, duplexes, ADUs, lot line adjustments and mergers, lot splits, multi-family residential developments under the Housing Accountability Act.
So question, would that apply to 1 Carter and to the Meadows?
This doesn't apply to the Meadows because of its current zoning. Because the zoning is institutional and the general plan land use designation is institutional, we will have an opportunity to do this kind of design review when it comes time for the specific plan. So the specific plan is going to be the opportunity for the Planning Commission and the City Council to weigh in as to design. But once that designation is changed to something like R1 or R3 or hillside or anything residential, we're going to lose that authority under these existing laws. Design review still applies for residential replacement, additions, and improvements, and all commercial developments, of course.
I want to follow on to what Commissioner Hutt said. So my understanding of the process would be that part of the process is we have to change the zoning from residential to whatever it is that they apply for when we see it. And if they applied for something that was then bound by this law, would our zoning it residential immediately subject it to the state law?
Are we talking about the Meadows now? Or
we can use the Meadows as an example. Sure.
So I want to avoid talking about the Meadows. So just talking about just speaking generally then, if we, I'm sorry, can you provide the question one more time, Commissioner?
If there is open land that has a non-residential zoning, or any building has a non-residential zoning, and we change the zoning to residential,
right?
Does it then immediately become subject to SB9 and AB803?
If you change it, it becomes subject to SB9 if it's single-family residential. The zone is single-family residential, and it becomes automatically subject to AB803 if it's multifamily residential.
So the follow-on question would be, is if we change zoning, including a specific design, will any of that hold any water once you've changed the zoning?
If you've changed this, one more time, I'm sorry, I don't understand. If you've changed this,
if the specific plan has more details in it than SB9 or AB803 allows, but the only way that you change the zoning is conditioned on them accepting that.
Right.
Just from a mechanical legal standpoint, what trumps what?
They'd be subject to the specific plan.
So the specific plan would trump the state laws.
Correct.
For how long?
As the specific plan would govern the development that takes place there. Now, if someone, and that's gonna bound the developer. Now, if someone purchases that property after the developer sells it and wants to do an urban lot split or wants to build an ADU, they can do that under SB9. But the developer is going to be bound by the specific plan.
But it only is held to the developer. Is there a way to then do a conditional zone change conditioned upon the developer completing the project? To avoid the idea that something gets purchased by somebody else and then they just get around.
Oh, I see what you mean. Let me give that some thought, Commissioner. I haven't thought about that, but let me think about that. That may be possible. Take a note of this.
But just to make sure I'm understanding one of the key takeaways, to the extent there's any design review that's going to be done that's binding, it has to happen at the time of the zone change, right? Because after that, there's not, the individual houses aren't going to come back before us.
Correct.
Okay, and then that's dealing with the hypothetical that might be the Meadows or some other development. But what about a development that's already approved, like One Carter? Does the fact that those were approved under the old law change anything, or do they now not have to do design review?
No, they're bound by the settlement agreement. Just like the Meadows, if it goes through, would be bound by the development agreement. So they're bound by contract, both of them.
And the settlement agreement requires a CUP with regard to the historic parts, but does it require a design review for the other part?
I would have to review the settlement agreement, Commissioner. I'm not sure.
It would require
the upshot is
hillside management permit.
Okay.
For One Carter, which is subject to design review.
Yeah.
So I believe that concludes the presentation. Happy to take any further questions. We can also, one thing, sorry, I forgot to note is, through this all, we wanted to make sure that we don't lose certain important reviews that are conducted. One such review is this historic preservation, and then the other is the tree preservation. We tried to incorporate both of these elements into the ordinance and try to draft them basically to be as objective as possible. So the way we've drafted it, if the applicant has a home that's, I think, I think it's over 75 years, they're required to contract with the historian to get a survey. And whatever the survey, we're not exercising any discretion here. Whatever the survey, if the survey comes back and says it's a historic property or has historic value, then it's going to list the mitigation measures. And then whatever those mitigation measures are, those will have to be followed. Same way with the tree preservation aspect of this ordinance. That tree preservation section says, if you have a certain protected tree on your property, you're going to have to go through the arborist. And when the arborist issues their report and finds that that's a protected tree, they're going to list a number of mitigation measures, and you have to follow those mitigation measures as a condition of approval of the permit. Again, we're not exercising discretion as the planning commission or as city staff for having a professional arborist, a professional historian issue mitigation measures that are going to be incorporated into the conditions of approval. So we're hoping that pass muster.
So I have questions about both those, because when I read them, under the historic preservation for 1759-060 and 1758-060, it talks about how the applicant will prepare a written historic assessment. But don't we have a process in place now where the applicant pays for a city-selected contractor to do that work?
Yeah, and
why didn't we not use that same process to get what we want? Because an applicant,
that is the process. That's just language you should clean up. That is exactly the process that we contemplated. That's the process staff contemplated, that the applicant would contract with the historian that's been sole sourced through the city, and that historian would prepare that report.
Well, we already have that process in place. Why can't we just reference that process, saying that they will follow the city's agreed upon process to create whatever, rather than create this whole another process for historic preservation? I mean, we already have it, so why don't we use it?
Right. So the reason we don't use it, and I'm hoping maybe Planner Wolf can help me, because otherwise I have to refer back to the ordinance. But I remember there were discretionary provisions that we felt, because they were discretionary in nature, might get this all kicked out, and we wouldn't be able to use it. So we tried to change the language to make it as objective as possible to incorporate it into this ordinance. Planner Wolf, do you remember what those provisions were that we decided might not be consistent with SB 9?
Right. So basically, exactly what city attorney says is that the process is what it's called is a discretionary demolition permit, and the name alone kind of suggests that it's discretionary in nature. Its findings are based in discretion. So we kind of tried to create a process following exactly what that was in structure as a skeleton and as a model to create an objective process.
So what is subjective about somebody having to pay the $1,200 to have a historical analysis done on that property?
Right. So the first finding of a discretionary demolition permit is either that it was found to be eligible for listing or it was found ineligible to be listing. And if it were ineligible, then the following findings were pretty much mute at that point. But we nonetheless had to find them that there would be no further impact to the history of Sir Madre in essence. But in order to avoid any possible conflict of discretion, we wanted to avoid having to make those findings in the first place, unless we can find other ways to make very specific objective findings.
Again, Commissioner Spears, it's taking that discretionary determination out of our hands and placing it into the hands of the historian or the arborist. The concern is if we're the decision makers, either planning commission or city staff, and we're exercising that discretion, there might be an issue. But if the professional is recommending mitigation measures, and those mitigation measures are, I'm sure, based on some kind of standard, one would hope, in their specific field, then then I don't see why HCD would be opposed to that.
So what you're saying is the California Department of Parks and Recreation 503 form, you create it, they rank whatever the historical value of the place is, and then how do you decide how much of it to save and how much of it that you can tear down? Isn't that a discretionary process?
It's those will be part of the mitigation measures, and those will be determinations made by the historian.
So in practice, if a Department of Parks and Recreation Series 523 form comes back and it's categories 1 through 5, we would ask the applicant to follow up with a subsequent design review, also prepared by the historian, who will create objective mitigation measures, if any, of the design proposed by the applicant.
Okay, so you've created this objective process. Tell me now why we don't take that and then put it back into existing city ordinances. Aren't we supposed to, as a city, have more objective criteria for people who want to modify their homes?
That's a good suggestion.
We could. It's a demolition permit that's causing the problem, because the demolition permit requires us to make findings.
Right.
And we don't want to make the findings, so this doesn't get challenged.
Isn't the demolition permit on our list of things to review and update?
It is.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's a good idea, and we should do that when we get to it on our to-do list.
Yeah, and the same concept more or less applies to the arborist, which also means that whoever the historian is going to be and the arborist is going to be, we should ensure that they're qualified and they do a good job, because they're going to be given a greater responsibility now.
Well,
it seems that it makes it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it seems all the more important to have a single source arborist, just like we do for historic review, because that has really worked out well in the historic setting, and you know, as we've said many times, the tree reports that we get from varied arborists are varied. So it would be great to have a lot more consistency in that front.
Yeah.
Director Gonzalez, would you like to share maybe some of the conversations we've had with Public Works on this issue?
Sure. So they are open to creating a qualified list of arborists, but there's still some hesitancy about creating a sole source contract with one arborist. But again, that's open to discussion when it goes to City Council as one of the Planning Commission's lists on that priority list of suggestions. City Council could debate that. Planning Commission member, a member of the Planning Commission member is also welcome to attend that and speak as representative of the Planning Commission or as an individual, probably as an individual, and share your viewpoint on the same topic. And Public Works will also be there to share their viewpoint. And that item is going to be going to City Council at their next meeting. I believe that's February 8th.
We just want to emphasize that we've begun that conversation with Public Works, and I think we're moving in that general direction.
I had a question.
Yes.
Going down some of the same lines there, one of the discretionary review processes we have now is for homes in the hillside zone. If we were to just ever so slightly amend the hillside zone to be a zone that is considered high risk, because this is the zone that is right at the wildland urban interface, would that then put them up for greater than ministerial review?
What do you mean by high risk?
You said that one of the mitigations is for health and safety, and certainly all the houses that are in the hillside zone are the ones that are right on that wildland urban interface where the fires come down. And so it seems like that's a natural zone that is in a high-risk area today.
So the exceptions that'll get you out of SB9 are those that are statutorily listed. In my mind, the one you're referring to is probably going to be the very high fire hazard severity zone,
Correct.
which it already is listed as. But the hillside areas, all of our hillside areas listed within the very high fire hazard severity zone. But it doesn't get us out of SB9 because we've adopted mitigation measures through the building code to deal with that very high fire hazard severity risk. So unfortunately, we can't use that exception.
And those mitigation measures are what, like sprinklers or just roofing materials?
Director Gonzalez can answer that one better than I can.
Yes, it's fire resistant building materials. It is sprinklers. It is on one side of the glazing has to be utilize safety glass. But it goes beyond that because the hazard mitigation plan talks about creating or prioritizing reduction measures, safety measures to be put in place that address, could be wildfire, severe wind occurrences, flood or landslide, earthquake events. So that's what the hazard reduction plan is looking at, all these various elements to address, including access, emergency access to various sites throughout the city. But certainly, yes, it includes building mitigation.
So, Director Gonzalez, are you referring to the local hazard mitigation plan that was created for FEMA?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know how that's linked to the state's laws. I think one is for federal, is mandated by the Stafford Act for local municipalities in order to receive post mitigation money and money for after an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not. I think I would like to know more about how that qualifies as a mitigation measure for the state. Has the state linked those two documents?
That I would have to.
Or does the fact that it just exists makes it? In other words, the fact that we had to do a FEMA document, does that automatically mean that we have mitigated? Because nothing has been mitigated. I mean, the references that you made have not happened.
Right, they're just plans.
Those are just those are aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would argue that the problem is still there, and I would also include the canyon zone because we cannot make better exits and egresses from the canyon zone, and we can't make the houses any farther apart, and we can't make them not out of wood, because all these things exist. Now we have a plan that if we get money, which is the local hazard mitigation plan, what it's there for, in other words, so you can apply for funds to mitigate hazards, then you can begin to address those. But we haven't received any funds to put in better windows or to make the streets wider or anything like that.
No, that would only apply for new construction and additions.
Yeah, so I would like to see some investigation into whether a FEMA document qualifies for a state mandate. Does that make sense?
Yes, but we also have the fire code that we rely on along with the building code. So that's why we have a fire marshal, and he evaluates all projects and determines whether it needs to be sprinklered. And if it's located in the high fire hazard severity zone, then we also ask for the safety glass on one side. And then fire resistant building materials, enclosing any overhanging eaves, and providing adequate screening for any exposed events.
And keep in mind, Commissioner Spears, this won't apply to most of the homes it'll apply to the existing properties in the hillside zone and the residential canyon zone to the extent they want to split the lot and build new homes.
Right.
Right, but it only applies to new homes. So if an individual doesn't intend, if an individual intends to improve their home or expand their home or something like that, none of this would apply to them. They're still coming to the city for design review permits.
I also have a question about lot splitting in the RC zone. Are those lots big enough to split?
This is the biggest issue we went back and forth on. We think that in a lot of these cases, I don't know in how many cases actually, it's going to be a fact specific inquiry. But some of these RC zone homes will probably be denied because regardless of what the underlying setback is and all that stuff, it just won't be safe to build.
And I don't think that many of those lots are not big enough to qualify under the state guidelines. I mean, I think a very small percentage of them are large enough to even fulfill the numeric options, much less the physical options.
Possible.
I have a question on the parcel map. It's not part of the ministerial review. How is it going to be listed if we're not going to end up, developing a new parcel map? Is it just going to still be listed as an R1 property or however it is without the actual lot split entered or designed onto a new map?
It's still, the underlying zoning remains. Actually, the strangest thing is this.
Yeah.
An AB803 development contemplates the development of single-family homes, but it contemplates the development of single-family homes in a multifamily residential zone. So you're going to have a bungalow court type situation where individual lots have to be split in order to sell those homes in fee simple. But you're going to be in a multifamily residential zone and there's no requirement to change the underlying zone. So that part's a little bit confusing.
But people in 803, if they do a split, can they do ADUs on the split lot?
Can they do ADUs on the split lot? I believe they can if their lot size would permit. Yeah.
So if R2 is covered under 803 and the maximum allowed is 2, then somebody could split an an R2 lot in half, right? And then put single family homes on each one of those, and then an ADU, or I guess a JADU and an ADU and a single family.
We wouldn't allow, well, so remember the underlying zoning is multifamily.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a multifamily, I'll have to look back at this, but I believe in a multifamily zone, you're limited to up to 2 detached ADUs. So under state law, I believe the limitation, again, I'll have to research it, but I believe the limitation is 2 detached ADUs for a multifamily zone, unless you change the underlying zoning.
Per lot though, right? Because you've split the lot. So you've taken the R2 lot and you've split it in half.
Per lot.
So you could put a single family on each, and then you can put a JADU and an ADU on each. So you could put 6 on R2.
Possible. Yeah, good point. Yes. Possible.
So R1 goes to 4, R2 goes to 6.
R2 can go to 6. Yes. Yeah. I think so.
Okay.
Also, I didn't really address this in the presentation, but given the changes in state law, I wonder how relevant R2 is now that you can build up to 3 and 4 ministerially. But I think that's a different conversation outside the scope of this meeting.
I have some questions on the minimum square footage per dwelling unit on these split situations. I kept seeing 800 as a number that was the minimum size. But in one of our discussions earlier, we talked about 400 units. I'm confused as what the minimum dwelling unit square footage is and what that's all about.
Yeah, so for an urban lot split, the primary parcel that's going to be split, the original parcel, needs to be at a minimum, what did I say? I think it was 2,400 square feet, is that right?
Yes.
Right.
Resulting lots must be at least 1,200 square feet apiece.
Yep.
So each of them must be at least 1,200. Now, once you split them, when you split them, the development that takes place on that property can't be the unit, the objective zoning standards that you impose for that lot cannot prohibit the development of a unit that's at least 800 square feet in size.
Okay, so it has to be at least 800. That means you can't put, well, I don't know.
And the maximum I think we set in the ordinance to be whatever the maximum is under the underlying zoning.
Do you know what the thinking is behind the, the minimum 800? Because there's a lot of really livable little houses that are less than that.
Yeah, I think the legislator is creating a distinction here between ADUs and these homes. ADUs they go pretty small.
Yeah.
They can be pretty tiny. And these aren't intended to be ADUs. These are intended to be something larger.
Okay.
So I think that's for the rationale. But I wasn't at the legislative hearings.
Okay.
I'm speculating.
And Peggy, just to clarify one thing I said earlier about the 400 feet, I meant a 400-foot floor plate that's 2 stories high.
Okay.
It gets you 800.
Yes.
So, like if you put 2 of those on a tiny little lot, you could theoretically.
So it's one unit that's 2 stories with a 400 square foot footprint.
Yeah.
So then we go back to my question is, does our municipal codes allow a 2-story building that can, a building that can do that? I mean, between the planes and all that?
Yeah. So that's the issue, right? It's silent as to height. SB9 silent as to height. So we can impose our height requirements. But if our height requirements prohibit this kind of development, then the height requirement has to be waived, or the setback requirement has to be waived, or some objective standard needs to be waived to accommodate this 800 square foot unit.
So whether we have code or not, it doesn't matter. They're going to build a 2-story.
If that's all they can build, yeah. And then the question remains, well, who gets to choose what development standard gets waived? I would argue the city. And you have to design according to whatever standard we waive. You don't get to choose which standard gets waived. Your design should, you'll get to build your 800, but your design should meet whatever the city thinks is most reasonable.
Yeah. Also, there's a Senate Bill 897 that's going through the process now that would make the minimum height that a city can require for an ADU 25 feet. So basically just allow people to build 2-story ADUs. So whether it comes now or later, we're gonna not be able to stop 2 stories on all this stuff.
Okay.
So I have a question about something you said, Mr. City Attorney. You said that it has to be at least 800 square feet, but it's governed on how big it can be by the underlying zone. Did I understand that correctly? Because here's what I'm asking. 800 square feet on a 1,200 square foot lot is a 66% coverage, which I don't think any of our zones allow. So we're basically saying, if the underlying zone is governing it, that you can build an 800 square foot house, not 799, because you'd be exceeding square foot coverage, and not 801, because you'd be exceeding our code. So you can only build an 800 square foot house. Am I understanding that correctly?
Let me think through this for a second. If our underlying zoning standards will apply, if our underlying zoning standards prevent them from building an 800 square foot home up to 2 units that are 800 square feet, by the way, on the single parcel, because of the duplex law, then some of those zoning standards will need to be waived. But if they can build 800 square feet and we can impose all our standards, then they'll be limited to whatever they can, then they'll have to build the 800 square feet and no more. Did I answer the question?
Except for the up to 2 units. Yes, you answered my question.
And I want to ask a question another way, because one of the criteria is the affordability by design rather than covenant. Would that also, what John was talking about, or Bob was alluding to, that if you could take 2 400 square foot footprints, put a make it 2 stories, that's it, and make it 800 square feet, and then stick one right next to it and make them sheer boxes with no angle planes, because that is probably the most efficient design, would they be able to argue they could build those things even though they're violating our angle plane because of the affordability by design requirement?
The answer is yes, but it's not clear right now how many of those types of developments there would be. The minimum lot size for a lot of these parcels is like 7,500 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many parcels we have in the city that are in the range of 2,400 or 3,000 that would cause someone to build up that way.
Right.
I imagine there aren't too many, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
And again, this is really, for those listening at home, I feel like there might be some confusion. SB 9 doesn't require this type of development. It's totally on the homeowner, the property owner, to choose whether or not they want to develop their home like this or to take advantage of this law.
Right. But my point was that I mean, I'm not a builder, but I just know from some experiences, the more angles and angulation you have of the house, the price goes up exorbitantly. When you build a big box design, you can put a lot of efficiencies in it to make it, affordable or inexpensive. And I can see some developers or somebody, just using that affordability to build something that they wouldn't necessarily be able to build. That's why I'm looking for theoretical stuff like everybody else. What we can prevent, or what are the possibilities?
Right.
Thank you.
That affordable by design concept isn't a requirement. It's just it's the principle motivating these laws. Because, like I said, if you're building a smaller home on an existing lot you already own, then it's going to be cheaper than purchasing a new lot, building new homes, all that.
Okay, right.
Yeah, I have another question on the floor area and how it interacts with the ADUs, because if somebody does an ADU, they can add 800 square feet, and we can't stop them from doing that, even if they would put them over our limit. But for this one, you said they're not ADUs. Could somebody elect to do like a SB9 split and then one house and then an ADU so they could do that 800 square foot?
Yes.
So just to use actual numbers, if you had a 7,500 square foot lot, which is pretty common in town in R1, and you split it in half, then each new lot would be allowed up to 35%, right? So that's 1,312 square feet. So if you had 1,312 square feet, then you did an 800 square foot ADU, you'd be looking over at 2,100 square feet on each half. So right. I think this again goes back to the issue that we really need to look at our floor area rules, because our ability to do discretionary design review is being chopped away. And there's all these special bonuses that people can add at FAR. So I think we really need to go back to what our floor area rules are and how they apply in these different situations with ADUs and SB9 and whatnot, and fashion those so that they work a little better. Because I think what's going to happen is we're going to look at our basic rule in R1, which is 35%. And if we don't really analyze this stuff, we're going to have people build some stuff that's going to be a whole bunch more than we think. And then people are going to be like, how did that happen? And the one good thing about floor area is it's very objective. It's a number. You can do the math. And so I really think, we have this to-do list of items that we need to fix going forward, that should really float to the top.
And thank you, Commissioner Hutt, for bringing up the ADU example so I can clarify something. If someone has a single lot and splits it into two and decides to take, so that's the first part of SB9, that's the urban lot split. And then you decide to build duplexes, the second part of SB9, right? So you have 2 lots and you go up. You have 2 units now, so 4 lots on the original, you have 4 units on the original lot. You can do that, but what you can't do is then begin adding ADUs. So you can take advantage of the urban lot split and then build single family homes and build ADUs behind them. And you can also do the urban lot split and take advantage of that ministerial design review and build duplexes. But you can't build the duplexes and the ADUs. You can't do both, or rather all 3. You can't do the urban lot split, ministerial design review, and ADUs. You can't do all 3. It's choose your 2. So that'll give you a maximum of 4 units per lot.
As a practical question, how is that going to be tracked? Is it the city is going to have to keep track of lots that were already divided so that the next owner doesn't come in and drop an ADU on it?
Yeah, the covenant that they're going to place on the property will note that, so it's going to be recorded, and also the parcel map that's going to be created from the urban lot split will include an annotation that says this was created via SB9.
I have a question about the covenants. When they talk about conditions of approval, they talk about the applicant will occupy one of the houses for either 3 to 7 years. Now, I've heard phenomenal stories that that some applicants have not presented the whole truth to some cities about their intentions. What is the process that we will have in place to make sure that they're following through? I mean, if you wanted mine, I think there should be a unannounced door knock. Hi, who are you? And show me that you live here. Because there's lots of ways to beat this. When I used to be at a school, people would say they lived in certain places so that they could attend certain schools, and they had all kinds of ways of pretending. And the only way we knew that they were actually living in a certain place was to get up at 6 in the morning and go knock on the door. Mm-hmm. But I mean, and then the second part of my question is, if they are found out to be lying to us, what's the penalty? They've already built the thing. We can't tell them to unbuild it. How do we make it painful enough so that there's gonna be compliance?
Right.
So, I mean, I would like to see unannounced door knocks. I'm serious. I mean, if the law allows us to check, and if that's what the compliance involves, then we should be able to do that. And then when they don't comply, it should be painful enough so that we're not going to get lied to by somebody who wants to take advantage.
So the first part of your question, how do we know they're not lying? We don't. Well, we're going to have them sign under penalty of perjury that they're going to live in that house. And that's the best we have. Now, what that means is if we find out, we have 2 remedies. One is they lied, they perjured themselves, it's crime. There's a criminal remedy there. Or we could pursue the administrative citation process and just begin fining them and fine them for every day they don't live there. And then the fines increase. I believe the current schedule is 100, 200, and then 500. You can fine them $500 per day for each violation. So financially, there's a real big stick there. And then, of course, I don't think we'd ever pursue something criminal unless we realize it's like some kind of scheme where multiple houses in the city are conspiring to, like someone owns multiple houses in the city and is conspiring to do this. Maybe then something criminal, but short of that, we'd use administrative fines. But how we find out is the problem. How we find out the problem, because right now our code enforcement relies on word of mouth from basically people, you know, reporting to us that someone's doing something wrong. I don't know if Director Gonzalez, I see you unmuted yourself. Maybe
we have a process now. If you have a Mills Act, you get a letter from the city on a regular basis on every year to make sure that you are part of the process. I mean, for the first time in a long time, we now keep track of people who have a Mills Act so we can follow up on that. I mean, the problem here is this person has made a lot of money by doing the lot split or adding the extra units on the house, and then they're gone. And, you know, you're right. In Sierra Madre, we rely on neighbors to turn in neighbors, and people don't do that because everybody, you know, wants to live and let live.
You don't think people do that? We get tons of code enforcement complaints.
I think as a percentage, it's pretty low.
A lot of construction happens in Sierra Madre between Friday night at 6 o'clock and Sunday morning or Monday morning at 5.
Greg, our code enforcement officer, is a busy guy, let me tell you.
Well, as soon as he goes home, a lot of stuff happens.
Can we limit the unit to either be owner occupied or very low income, so that if they do skip out, they have to at least lease it at a very low income rate?
It's a good thought. I just don't think it's possible because the statute says that it has to be one of the units have to be owner occupied. We don't have a choice in that one, so I don't think it's possible, unfortunately.
What if the owner dies or absolutely has to move for financial reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Within the 3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, things happen.
Good point.
So.
I'll take a death certificate as a good excuse.
It's a great hypothetical that I think state law hasn't contemplated, and that we will when the time comes.
Okay. So I've got another question. I'm thinking of a residential neighborhood, and let's say somebody, you know, splits their lot, or let's do the lot split with 2 duplexes, and they do a really nice job. It's really cool. And their neighbor says, oh, that's a really good idea. But because it's their neighbor, according to something I read here, they can't do it?
I think, let me check. I think the limitation is that the same owner or someone conspiring with the owner.
Oh, that would make more sense. Okay.
Yeah, I believe, let me just check the ordinance real quick. I'm sorry, 1 second. Under the eligibility provision, the applicant's parcel is not adjacent to another parcel that was subject to an urban lot split by either the applicant or someone acting in concert with the applicant. So yeah, so your neighbor could do it.
Okay, good.
Yeah. You can't buy 2 lots next to each other and do it though.
Okay. That makes sense.
To discourage basically, you know,
yes,
speculating and commercial development. Any other questions?
I have some specific questions on the 803, the 30 units to the acre issue.
Yes.
One, we list the new zones as one of the potential places that it could be, but those are necessary to meet our RENA numbers, right? And the R330 is minimum 30 units the acre. So I don't think we should have either of those two as possible sites.
And we can't, because it can't compete with our RENA identified sites.
Right. The other thing is, I think that the concept of within 500 feet of a 30 units the acre, I understand the concepts, why the legislature would want to do that, but I think it's very difficult for a homeowner to understand where that is, because you don't see zoning necessarily. And so I think it would be very useful if the city could produce a map that has all of the areas that have 30 units the acre. I would think it's just R330 and the senior housing project. I don't know if the Kensington counts, but whatever. If we could, make a map that has those and then draw the 500 feet on it, and then have that as a handout at City Hall, so somebody could easily look and say, "Oh, my property doesn't qualify for this."
Noted.
Yeah, we can look into doing that exercise.
Chair Pepsner, should we open it to public comment?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, sure. Let's open this up to public comment. Anybody standing in the wings or wants to call in, we'll give you 3 minutes to come in and call in and have a say. Anybody in the queue right this minute, Christian?
No one at this time.
Okay. Well, count down. Two minutes. And 1 minute. Winding down. Okay. Nobody there. Okay.
No callers at this time.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Since this is just a discussion item, I guess, we're not making any determinations. I guess we'll just move on to the next item then.
Did we want to review, I think there was some proposed language in there?
Well, I mean, we took some notes on it, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how, if you want to look at the actual language within the
I did have one.
text.
I did have one question.
Yeah.
There was a provision about easements for an interior lot. So it was a flag lot, I believe. This is section 16.18.050, page 29 of the packet. And it referred to flag lot standards, an interior lot with no front lines, and that the line separating the two parcels is not less than 50 feet from existing front line. There were some standards in here that referred to how far away from a road that the flag lot would be and how many parcels were allowed. And I was just curious as to why there was special designations for flag lots in there. We have some private roads in town, and any of those private roads would likely disqualify people if you had a flag lot up one of those private roads. So I was trying to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we were thinking that if someone decides to create a duplex on a single parcel, state law requires that we have to allow that each unit be at least 800 square feet. And we thought some of those homes might be placed in the back. And so we wanted to create separate flag lot standards for those homes in case they're placed in the back of so there'd be a home in the front and a home in the back. That's what was motivating that decision. We're definitely open to any amendments if you think.
Well, I mean, is Olive Tree Lane's private road, right? Above Grandview?
If one of the planners can help me out, I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll say hypothetically it is. I know there's up Auburn, there's private road. There's a few private roads in town, right? And many of those private roads have more than 2 parcels on them. And so it seems like we're excluding the ability for this to be done at those houses.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we contemplated the private road issue. So we'll have to go back and look at that.
Well, one thing we added a while back was a concept for design for shared private driveways, and that's in section 1720.100C. And so I think to the extent we could incorporate any of those concepts that still mesh with state law into this, it would be helpful. One of the things we definitely wanted to do is that if you have a shared private drive, you have all the houses facing that driveway, as opposed to having a flag lot that has, a separate driveway for the front house and then a flag lot, because then you just get a whole bunch of driveways. And that way they all face the shared private driveway, and it makes it more of a communal setting. So if you could take a look at that code that we have, that we developed a few years back, and we even have a pretty little diagram, which is based on that one off of Auburn.
What was the section reference, Commissioner?
It is 17.20.100C.
And the section that I was referencing in your code was 16.18.050B.
Yep. So if we could sort of mesh those, I think that would be great.
Makes sense.
And I assume that I already mentioned the issue of the eligibility of the 30 units the acre, but if we have any other specific comments or whatnot, we can email those to staff, right?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other specific changes or suggestions anybody want to add in? Vince, did you get enough feedback from some of the things we talked about to make notes, to make changes without having to go in and, do a line by line look at this?
I think we did, and we'll spend some more time with the city attorney to go through this again.
Okay. All right.
One of the things that I don't think we were going to get an answer to in this meeting, and maybe you can help us when we discuss this again, was you'd taken the notes on what happens if it's a specific plan and then another developer buys it, or there's a specific plan and it doesn't get developed. So I know you're going to take that away and look into that. But another question would be how this applies at 1 Carter. And if, I think it was Commissioner Spear's questions, if a sale of the lot happens away from the builder that was joined to the settlement, then do these laws now apply?
No. So I can answer both those questions actually now. With respect to specific plan, if the specific plan is adopted and one developer is party to the agreement, then that developer sells all their land rights to another developer, that second developer is still bound because they're a successor in interest, and there's a specific clause in the development agreement that says all successors in interest are bound. So that developer will also have to build subject to whatever the specific plan says once it's built. Same thing with the 1 Carter properties. The settlement agreement has that same successor in interest provision. The only question I can't answer, and then I'll have to look into, is was your suggestion about conditioning. I think you had said something like, we want to make sure that they build before we change the zoning, correct?
Yes.
Or in the alternative, to find some way to make sure that they do build, or if they don't build, they can't alienate it, or the zoning reverts back or something. So I'll look into that one and get back to you. And I may bring that up at the meeting on the 15th.
You're on mute, Commissioner Spears.
I
There you
think,
go.
is it my impression that these recent state bills are changing the way we're going to be able to manage the development at the Meadows?
I don't think so, because I kind of want to avoid talking about the Meadows now, but to answer your question directly, SB 330 doesn't apply to the entitlements in the first phase of this development. SB 9 doesn't, AB 803 doesn't, density bonus doesn't, ADUs don't right now. So my answer would be no. This is one of those rare situations where city's in control.
Good. Then it may be helpful to make that reference at some point on the 15th, because there are a lot of people that are confused on the issue.
Okay. If I don't, please remind me. I'll clarify.
It's just based on conversations I've had to listen to.
Sure. Yeah.
So I guess if we were to change the zoning before we had a specific plan, that would open up all of those lots to this unreviewed development.
Potentially, yeah, it's possible.
Okay.
Okie doke. Anyone else? Okay. Well, Well, let's just, maybe we could move on to the next thing. If anybody, thinks of something, because we're going to be reviewing something that sort of brings up similar issues, we can go back to it as well. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that we are bringing this item to the commission as a public hearing at our next meeting.
Okay, very good. I guess we'll go on to the next discussion item of number 2 on the chapter 1734, affordable housing.
Yes, and our city attorney has the ability to discuss this again.
You're on.
All right. I'm glad we did SB9 and AB803 first, because this second part is easy. Density bonus law is back, something that keeps changing, and we want to change with it. So we make sure that staff and the city attorney and everyone is up to date on the latest, so we don't get any surprises. So this presentation is just, every slide is going to follow this format: what the law was, what the new law is, the impact on the relevant sections of the ordinance. So first, the density bonus law, as it existed, referred to common interest developments. This term had a very specific definition in the Civil Code, and it referred to condos. It also referred to like stock cooperatives, which are when a corporation owns the condo basically, and people own stocks in the corporation. Planned developments, community apartment project, which is a different concept. The legislator expanded the definition. So now the new law says developments in which units are for sale. So it's intended to be broader than just condos and stock cooperatives and planned developments. Any unit that's for sale. The effect is, like I said, it expands the type of for sale, moderate, and low income housing units that can benefit from the density bonus law. Next, this is just a technical error that we had made in the initial draft and that we're correcting now. Before, I think, as you can see, we had listed 35%, and now we're correcting to 30%, which is what state law requires. Just a minor calculation error that we're correcting.
City Attorney, if you could advance your slides.
Oh, I did, and you don't see it. Let me stop sharing and reshare that. Thanks for informing me. Do you see amendment number 2?
No.
No, I think you have not selected full screen yet.
What do you see now? Is it amendment number 1?
Yes.
Amendment number 1, as you were going to edit the document, not slideshow.
And do you see amendment number 2 now?
Yes. Not a slideshow, but this is fine. Just continue.
Yeah, I think that's fine. The third amendment we're making here is where we want to include that preliminary design review provision again. I can think of at least 1, potentially maybe 2 projects that have been granted density bonuses in the city that the Planning Commission hasn't seen. So at least if we include this preliminary design review provision, the Planning Commission will see those projects and will have the opportunity to comment on them. Again, it's intended to be advisory. The Commission won't be actually granting the density bonus, but it will allow the Commission to make comments on design. There was an amendment to the incentives, concessions, and waivers provision. So formally, we were permitted to deny an incentive, concession, or waiver if there is a specific adverse impact on the physical environment. They took out the specific impact on the physical environment language. That physical environment language no longer exists, probably because all these density bonuses are being granted in the middle of the city, and the physical environment there, any impact on the physical environment would be maybe noise or traffic, but not the traditional environmental consequences we think of, like, harm to species and destruction of the natural environment. So all that's left now, in order to deny one of these incentives, concessions, or waivers, is if there's a specific adverse impact on the public health or safety, or on the real property listed in the California Register of Historical Resources. Number 4, parking. Under our existing ordinance, there's a reduced parking ratio of 0.5 for housing developments with at least 11% very low income or 20% lower income. New law adds that housing developments with at least 40% moderate income can take advantage of the 0.5% standard too. So it just expands the type of developments that can take advantage of the reduced parking ratio. Appeals. Every permit, every ordinance that we have that issues a permit should have an appeal process for 2 reasons. One, it prevents any claim that we've denied the applicant due process. And second, if there's a mistake by either the director or the planning commission, we would like an opportunity to correct that mistake at the city level before an applicant sues on the permit. So appeals are very, very helpful, and we're including an appeal provision in this ordinance. So now, whereas there wasn't one before, now there will be, and the applicant will be able to appeal a determination made by the director to the planning commission. And the planning commission will then be the final say. And if they don't like the planning commission's determination, then they can sue us, but not before. Duration of affordability restriction. So existing law requires that affordable units be subject to a recorded affordability restriction of 55 years. Under AB 634, the city is authorized to pass an ordinance establishing an affordability period longer than 55 years. However, the city isn't recommending changing that 55-year period. Like one thing we can do under this new law is, extend it out in perpetuity. But in discussions with planning staff, we thought that that may not be wise, because if the life of the building is something like 55 years, we want to incentivize the property owner to make the necessary upgrades or to replace the structure if necessary. And it might, by creating some kind of affordability restriction in perpetuity or for a longer period, it might basically dissuade them because we remove the financial incentive to do so. And that concludes the presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, wow, that was quick. Any questions?
I have a few if no one else does. First, just not a question, but so much as a confirmation of the 55 years. I think it very much makes sense not to lengthen that, because 55 years is already a pretty long time to expect the structures to last. And we definitely don't want, far into the future, these things dilapidating and not being updated. So I think we should keep that at the minimum. Another specific question was on page 46 of the packet. Let me see if I got the right page number. No, I'm sorry, 48 of the packet, section 6. We start talking about rental units and for sale units. I guess that comes in on a couple of different places. And I'm wondering, number one, why we want to distinguish between these two, and if we can, under state law, just take out that distinction. And if somebody builds an affordable rental moderate, it seems like that, that should be fine.
I think this is the one regarding incentives and concession awards. That's the one.
Yeah, section 6, but I think it comes up in a couple other places, but this is a good example. It says minimum number of for sale units of moderate income. I'm not saying we should switch that to rental. I'm just saying we should take the whole rental or for sale out of this, because if somebody provides that number of units, they should have that concession, whether they're rental or for sale. And I understand there's arguments against the for sale on the low. But it seems for moderate, we should be able to do rental or for sale, because for sale is really tough.
Yeah, there is nothing that prevents the city from issuing its own density. So this density bonus law only has the moderate income provision. There's nothing preventing the city from issuing density bonuses for moderate income rental units. So we could do that if the commission wants.
Yeah, I think my recommendation would be we take in this chart, and I think there might be in a couple other places, maybe in table 3 above, the for sale versus rental concept out, and just make it, moderate income units. And then I've got a couple other that are sort of broader concepts that we discussed last time we looked at this ordinance, and we talked about that the definition of a housing development is set in state law, and we can't amend it. But one thing we could potentially do, and we discussed this after we did the last ordinance, is include a new category called a small housing development, which is a housing development that's 2 to 4 units. And then we basically could apply all of the benefits that go to a housing development, which is 5 or more, to a small housing development. And the reason we want to do this is because this whole state law is written for big cities where they have big developments, and we just don't have very many of these. And if we ever want to produce affordable units to meet our RENA numbers, we really need to be doing it on 2s and 3s and 4s. We're not going to get them. I mean, we're just not going to get very many 10-unit developments. That doesn't come along very often. But it's quite possible we could have someone who's got a 3-unit development that decides to put a 4th unit in based on this, and then provide us an affordable unit. So I'd like to see to use that concept to define small housing development as 2 to 4 units, and then add that in.
Query how useful it would be, because you're trying to incentivize a 4th unit, but if under SB9 they can build 4 units ministerially, how useful would it be to incentivize that in a density bonus?
Well, if they could build 4, then under SB9 they could build 5 under this, and then the 5th unit would be affordable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's also a definition of senior housing development, which I think starts at 24 units if memory serves, and we could lower that down to, I don't know if we want to do 5 to 23 or whatever. So we could capture some smaller projects, and actually provide some affordable units. And then the other concept, which is a similar idea, is that we've got tables in here for how many, for the incentives that you get, and you have to provide all very low or all moderate. You can't mix. And so I understand state law does not allow us to change those tables. So that's fine. What I'm thinking about doing is providing an alternate where you can mix and you get so much bonuses for each. And that way you could have a very low and a moderate, or, 2 moderates and 1 very low, or however you work that out. So it effectively gets you the same amount of credits, but you can mix it up. And I think having mixed income projects is a lot better from a social perspective than sort of congregating all the very low in one building. And also from a developer standpoint, when you try to get these things to pencil out, if you can get your maximum bonus on a small project by having a low and a moderate, but the way we have it set up now, you'd have to do 2 low, that might be the difference between the deal working and not working. And so I really think it would be useful if we could put an alternate table that allows people to mix the different income classes, and get the bonuses where they basically add up the different things that are effectively the same as the separate tables. So we keep all the separate tables so we comply with state law, but then we have an alternate that somebody could use.
Okay, that, I think I follow. Let me talk to planning staff about those amendments, and we may have to follow up with you offline later to really capture some of those distinctions, because it might be more difficult in practice.
Understood.
I think those are great ideas, by the way. I think that's, especially given the size of the town, and so.
I agree. I don't think we're going to see any large development. So I think this has already happened on one project on Suffolk where they added another unit because they were able to do that. So yes, this is something that has already borne fruit. So yeah, let's use that as the example and the possibility.
Anything to get our readers numbers.
Yep. Yeah, they're just going to get bigger.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have anything they wanted to tweak or add or?
No, just note we haven't done public comment yet on this one.
Yeah, no, that's next.
Still with us.
I'm just making sure nobody has any thoughts, because I mean, when I went through this, it was like reading it it's like the more I read it, the more confused I got. And then I got to that chart that you're talking about, and I didn't even want to try and think of practical examples. So we're gonna have to work this out. But I guess the basic premise is we're mandated by state law to do all this. So I guess we want to make it as flexible for us as possible. So. All right, very good. Well, then I guess if nobody else has anything else to add, we'll open this up to public comment. Anybody standing in the queue? And if not, we'll give you 3 minutes. Nobody so far? Okay, 3 minutes.
Yet.
Thank you. Sorry. Computer. Okay, 1 minute. And 10 seconds. Okay, nobody there. We will.
Nobody called.
Okay, very good. Anything else? Anybody else want to add anything or thought of anything to add to this? Anybody? Peggy? Bob?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we'll see. I guess we're going to have quite the agenda next meeting, huh? Vince, with the other stuff.
I don't think I'll be presenting the same presentations though. We may, if it's okay with Director Gonzalez and you chair, we may just go straight to open the public hearing and then have questions.
Yeah, sure. That's fine by me. I mean, unless anybody else that he has objections or wants to hear it again, we can bring that up at the time because we're going to have the other text amendments that we have to look at as well. Okay, I guess we'll move on to the last item here. Somebody wants us to move our time. Consideration for amending the Planning Commission regular meeting time under Chapter 2, City Council. Vince, somebody wants to give us a little primer on this? What's going on?
So basically, my report to the Planning Commission is going to be very brief. But back in July 2021, City Council adopted a resolution setting a new City Council meeting time at 5:30 p.m. in lieu of their 6:30 p.m. time frame. So now the council desires to maintain consistency between the council and the city commissions, and staff has been directed to initiate discussions within the respective commissions regarding meeting start times. And based on this directive, staff is proposing that the Planning Commission discuss changing their meeting time in parity with the Planning City Council to 5:30 p.m. and forward that recommendation to City Council for consideration. That concludes my report.
Okay. Well, anybody who can make that time period? I guess it's
5:30 works for me. I can do that.
Well, Bob, are you gonna be off the trail by then?
I'm retired, so I'm sure I can make 5:30. But I'm more concerned on a larger level. The Planning Commission works because we have a diversified group of people contributing to how they see Sierra Madre changing and laws being applied. And we kind of got hit when the City Council decided that they wanted less people on the Planning Commission, and we went from 7 to 5, and that kind of limited the number of people who are going to that did limit the number of people who could contribute to the discussion. We as a Planning Commission really need people who are professionally engaged in this arena, who can contribute their knowledge and understanding of what's going on, because we're up against developers and lawyers and people who are being paid a lot of money to convince us that, people should be able to cut down trees and take out houses and do whatever else. And right away we have less people to draw on, and we've already heard from the mayor that it's too hard to find commissioners and he doesn't want to do the work, which I found really sad. And I am not in favor of doing anything that would limit the pool of people that we can have on this commission to contribute to the success of the city of Sierra Madre. And if you have people that have a professional job and tell them, hey, you got to leave and get back in Sierra Madre by 5:30, the number of people you could have on this commission who could contribute to the success has just gone down. And so while I'm retired, but when I was working, 5:30 would have been a bridge too far, because I was lucky to get out the door by 5:30. So I am not in favor of this, because we rely on volunteers to do a lot of the commission work in the city of Sierra Madre. and those volunteers have real jobs in real organizations, and you are limiting the scope of the discussion by doing that. And the scope in this of the critical mission of the Planning Commission has already been eroded by the City Council once, and I see this as another opportunity to erode it even further.
That's a good point.
Well, for me,
yeah,
go ahead, John.
I was just going to say that, you know, during coronavirus and remote work and whatnot, to me right now, the time doesn't matter, and 5:30 is fine. I mean, midday is fine really for that purpose, but hopefully this doesn't go on forever, and, you know, people actually maybe commute again and go to these office building things. And at that point, 5:30 is going to be tough. So I don't know why a long time ago we set 7 and the City Council did 6:30. So if we want to move it up to 6:30 maybe, but if we want to sort of just be a little earlier so we can get out a little earlier, that's fine. But I do think 5:30 is tough to get here for anybody who commutes pretty much anywhere outside of town. I mean, let alone downtown LA or the West Side.
Now, the commission does have, as an alternative, the ability to select a different time.
Right. Tom, any thoughts? Because
I think that I understand the idea of parity of the timing. I understand that concept, but I mean, I've had a hard time. There were city council meetings that I wanted to go to that frankly I was still working during. So it seems like it might be a limiting factor, not just for the commissioners, but for people who want to come and attend and have their opinions heard as well. And I mean, maybe they get a fine turnout at city council and this isn't something to be concerned with, but I definitely think that's something to balance.
my answer is pretty easy. I don't think I'd make it. I think that's, Bob just almost spoke for me. You know, I'm not that far away, but I'm far enough away that I don't really have a lot of control sometimes over when I actually leave. So I'd be against it. I sometimes barely make the 7 o'clock meeting. So I don't know. I think if I'd recommend, I mean, it's not for me personally, because I've been on this commission for a long time. But I know I couldn't make it. It would be, someone else would be running the meetings for sure in the next 6 months till I became off being chair, and then I'd hate missing a lot of meetings because of that. So I'd respectfully ask them to let us keep our same time period. At least that's how it would affect me. So I don't know if we want to, do we need to have a consensus? Would you like to? I mean, Bob's against it, I'm against it, just as a practical matter. Everybody else seems to be flexible. I don't know, should we vote on it?
Or you can suggest an alternate time, 6:30.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, that still might be tight for me. I mean, this is only for me personally. My sweet spot is that if I get home, I get a few extra minutes to actually get settled. You know, especially with the Zoom meetings. If I have to come to the meeting, I suppose I could come straight to the meetings. But I don't know. I kind of like our meeting time. I don't really want to change it, but that's my own personal feeling.
I recommend leaving it at 7.
Go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I mean, I don't think this is about Bill individually. I think you're a very good example of someone who works out of town and is the kind of person who we want on the commission. And so, you know, I guess I don't understand what the benefit of consistency is. I mean, if council gave us direction that there's some overriding reason why it's really important that we have them all at the same time, but it just seems like, you know, we're gonna, as Bob said, we're gonna cut down the pool of people who can make the meetings, and not just commissioners, but people who want to attend to comment and whatnot. And
Yeah.
you know, before COVID, we used to have a large number of people who would come and comment. And I don't know. I think the participatory democracy is the whole point of this gig.
Yeah.
Chair, if I could add something.
Go ahead.
Provide some background as to where this is also coming from. Obviously the Planning Commission is one of many commissions, and other commissions have wanted to change their time. And the City Council is the one that changes the times for the commissions. So they started this discussion with all the different commissions. The Planning Commission isn't the only commission. And so all the individual commissions are reevaluating what's best for them and providing recommendations to the City Council.
Yeah, I mean, my only other thing, and I appreciate the support for people that, you know, have diversified backgrounds, is that, you know, we have our own, I mean, the Planning Commission has our own separate culture. And I mean, yes, we're subject to the City Council, but we do a lot of the heavy lifting, you know, for them in terms of code revisions and whatnot. And I don't know, if they want to dictate to the other commissions, that's their prerogative. But I don't want to make them actually have to feel like we're special, but I think in that sense, we do probably do enough of an important work that if we don't keep that diversity, it might affect, you know, our effectiveness. So that would be my only logical recommendation, to maybe single us out somehow. Go ahead, Peggy.
As an example of that, recently we've been having meetings for the public to come in and learn about the Meadows project, and that would be much harder for a lot of people at 5:30. It's a really a committee that helps the public connect to the city. It works better at 7.
You know, one of our functions is that we give the public a chance to comment on things that are happening in their neighborhood. And while they don't always get their way, and mostly a lot of times they don't, at least they have the opportunity to come in and be heard. And I am not in favor of limiting that. I think it sets the tone for how the public relates to its city and the city ordinances, and allows them to ask questions and have their answers be heard. And reducing that opportunity, I don't think, is a good recipe for a relationship between a city government and its people. You know, I'm more than happy to sit here and listen to people complain, and people call us names about how we don't do this or we don't do that, but at least they have the opportunity to make their statements, and they're being heard, and it's part of the process. And anything to limit that process, and also limit the who can show up to make those statements, I'm not in. I already enough, especially on the Planning Commission, and that we should, especially given the fact that we have a major development on the horizon, we're gonna need to provide many opportunities for people to express their opinions. And you know, every now and then there's a nugget of important information. John and I can talk about how many ordinances have come into being because somebody came and commented about a neighbor's development, and we never thought about X, Y, or Z. And we need to keep that valve open so that we can continue to do that. Otherwise, we don't really represent the people. We're just a bunch of, you know, so I think we need to be as open and as transparent and as encompassing as possible, and enjoy and encourage people to come and talk to us, and also have more voices on this commission.
Chairman Pesner?
Yes.
If you don't mind, I can just give a little context for the discussion we had at the council meeting when the time was changed. There's actually a fair amount of split opinion in terms of the access and the transparency and the opportunity for public involvement about the time. So I completely agree with everything that Commissioner Spears was saying. And personally, I fall along the same lines as most of you in terms of later being better for me personally. But there was actually a fair amount of public comment, either emails to us or at the meeting, that later meetings actually, in some people's minds, limits participation. For example, it's 9:30. We're obviously towards the end of the meeting, but a lot of people would say that commenting on an item that gets spoken at that gets brought up at 9 o'clock at night is on the other end of the spectrum. So I don't know that an earlier meeting would necessarily be viewed or by some people as limiting participation. In some ways, people wanted earlier meetings because they felt like it would encourage participation. So I just want to point that out, that there is a disparity in views on that through the community. I totally agree on the recruitment for the commission. I mean, given the likely pool of applicants, more likely than not to fall along the lines of professionals and having trouble, with a commute to get to meetings on time for a 5:30 meeting, that totally makes sense to me. But I just wanted to give you the context that we actually did get feedback that an earlier meeting would be better for some people in terms of ability to attend and participate.
Sure. Well, yeah, I understand that. I just think this is my own personal opinion, is that obviously not just because of my restrictions, is that we sort of have an established culture. And unless I haven't heard from the public that, you guys go too late, by the time 10 o'clock rolls around, you get something going, we're too tired or someone doesn't show up, you know what I mean? When we get a rallying, and I think we've had enough heated issues in the past. I mean, if anything, we've maybe erred by discussing things in sort of almost beating a dead horse in some respects. And I think we've had many meetings. I can, think back 10 years where we were here till 11 o'clock discussing things, and there was plenty of energy for the issue. So I don't know. I just know that it would be very difficult for me to make meetings personally. I don't want to limit anybody else's opinion or even try and tell the city council what to do. But I hope that if you take that back to them, maybe they can consider the uniqueness of what we do, and that maybe that'll make it, I don't know, carve us out of some of the different committees. Commissions. Does anybody else want to? Does anybody have do we want to submit a consensus, or have you heard enough, Kelly? Do you take something back to the city council? I don't want to put the burden on you, but since you are this liaison, I hope.
Yeah, I can provide the context. I think actually the planning director probably takes back the formal feedback, but yeah, I can definitely provide the context from having heard.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks. Well, yeah. Director Gonzalez, I think you heard what we said. It's, the recruitment issue. Some of us just personally couldn't make it, and that would limit our future participation even as a committee. And with a smaller group, I don't know if we'd have trouble making a quorum at that point with 3 people showing up. So anything else you guys want to add?
Chair, I should also take a public comment at some point as well.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that we get a list before I move on.
I think one thing we should also keep in mind is that in the past we have had some measures that involve the younger people, like the approval of the dance studio. And when we had those kind of things, we always tried to move them to the top of the meeting so that those items wouldn't go really late and that people could get home. And I think we need to continue to be mindful of that, because if it's sort of a typical development item that runs a little late and it's mostly adults who are at the meeting, that's one thing. But if we do have something about baseball or dance studio or something like that, we should continue the process and practice of putting that item first.
All right, very good. All right, we'll take it. Another little recess for public comment. If someone's in the wings, we'll go ahead and start. If there's no one in the queue, we'll give you 3 minutes to call in. Starting now.
You have one caller that would like to speak.
Go ahead. Go ahead and cue her in.
Caller, you are live.
Good evening.
Go ahead, caller.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, turn off your radio or the television, whatever you're listening on. Sure.
Okay, is that better?
Yes. There's still an echo, but go ahead.
Oh.
Hello?
She hung up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what that was. Well, we'll give her some time to call back in. I'm sorry.
I will let you know once she's back in the queue.
Okay. We'll keep counting then. Yeah, I want to encourage you, whoever that was, please call back in. We're still waiting.
They are back in the queue. Let me patch them in.
Great, thank you.
Hello? 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 Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Are you also listening on your TV?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I accidentally hung up. My name is Kathy Watson. I live at 150 South Baldwin.
What happened?
Bear with me 1 second. I think I see the problem.
Okay. Thank you. It's okay.
Kathy, if you can hear this, it looks like you might have another audio source that's playing at the same time that you're trying to speak. So it would be best to unmute your phone, your whatever device you're calling in, and make sure that the volume is off on the other device that's broadcasting in your home.
Is that working?
That's working.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. My name is Kathy Watson. I live at 150 South Baldwin. Just had a brief comment. I would love it if you decided that you would begin the meeting earlier, but I understand your concerns. My bigger concern is that I am hoping that you will start meeting in person again, because I think you get a lot better feedback from the community and participation by the community by doing that. And that's just all that I would like to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else waiting?
No other callers looking to provide comment at this time.
Okay. Well, that took some time, so I guess we'll.
Director Gonzalez, have we received any feedback as to when we may be heading back into chambers?
We were looking at this as a 30-day event, so we're coming up to that 30 days, but I'm going to wait for City Council to make that determination.
The joint meeting happens after that 30-day expiration?
I think it happens even before that.
But it's outdoors, so
It's outdoors,
it's not subject to the same concerns because it's going to be outside.
Right. Okay. Very good. All right. So I guess we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission. There's just our planning commission reports then. Anybody from the planning commission have anything to report or bring up or need some help up on the trail, Bob? Always, huh? If not, okay. Planning and Community and Preservation Departments, Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. As you alluded to, we do have a full schedule for our February 17th meeting. 2 public hearings are being scheduled for the items that we discussed this evening. We also are bringing back the R3 and church overlay amendments that was continued from our January 1st or January 20th meeting. And we're also adding another topic on that agenda to begin discussions regarding the general plan amendment and zone change for those parcels that were downzoned to achieve consistency between our land use map and zoning map that we looked at and City Council adopted. There was a lot of public concern about those downzone properties from the 2015 general plan update. So we're bringing that back as directed by council. That concludes my report.
Okay, very good. Well, unless anybody has anything else they want to bring up that they just remembered, then we will adjourn our meeting to February 17th.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.